Hi, everybody. This is Eric Pennington, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. Today's episode, we're going to talk about increasing empathy.
Life is a journey. Spirit of EQ helps shape and guide the road ahead for individuals, leaders, teams, and organizations striving to realize their full potential through emotional intelligence. Spirit of EQ is a coaching and consulting company that assists individuals and businesses to reach their full potential by developing emotional intelligence. In business, managers and leaders recognize the value of training to develop leadership skills. What they may not realize is that those skills are far more effective when they pay attention to not only performance, but also to people. Emotional intelligence is a crucial skill because people drive performance and emotions drive people. After this podcast, listen for a special opportunity to learn more.
With us today, as always, is Jeff East. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Hi, Eric. I'm doing fine.
Very familiar with the word empathy. It's a powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
But today we're going to talk about increasing it. So maybe for the audience, empathy means what? And then we can dive into how do we increase it.
Two words get sometimes mashed together that really don't have that much to do with each other, at least in my mind, is sympathy and empathy. You know, we get sympathy cards. We feel sympathetic towards someone. Sympathy is to me, more of a surface emotion rather than something deep. Sympathy almost always, to me, means I'm sorry you're going through that, but I'm glad it's not me. You know, when somebody shows sympathy, they're almost showing a position superior to the person that's going through what it is because they're not sharing it.
Is that almost kind of like a pat on the back and saying, hey, I'm sorry that this happened,
right?
And moving on.
How often do we, you go into work or you go into some place that you go to all the time, a restaurant, and the person that waits you in your restaurant or your coworker, how you doing today? Not so good. Well, I'm sorry. And you go on about your business.
Gotcha.
Or you can tell that there's something off. Empathy is a lot deeper. Empathy is when you actually are putting yourself as best you can into that person's shoes, for want of a better word. You're actually connecting with their emotions. And most times there may not be something in your life that's exactly the same, but something that's shared. And there's some things about it. It's non-judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with empathy, you're not going to tell the person, well, you should have done this way, or it's not that bad. That's the last thing somebody that's really feeling upset about something is it's not that bad. And to be open, to be truly empathetic, you need to be open to the other person. Be genuine. Don't hold anything back.
I would imagine that there's a number of people that hearing this would say, well, yeah, Jeff, I do that. I absolutely, I know how to put myself in their shoes. Or maybe a great example for me is that I experienced a lot of corporate downsizing and, eliminating of position. So anytime that someone tells me or I hear about someone losing their job, I'm drawn to that. Hey, I know what that feels like. But let's just say that is true. And so how do we increase it? Because we can't I don't want us to be in that place, right, where we're saying, well, as long as you did that, you're good. How do we increase empathy?
You increase it, one of the most important things we can do for someone is to listen to them, to actually give them your undivided attention. In today's world, put your phone down. If you're at your desk, shut your laptop or turn your screen off. Give them your undivided attention and listen to them. And then sharing. Once again, you don't want to, some people have a tendency to try to outdo them for the bad thing that's happening.
Would that be like drawing an example from their own life?
Or drawing an example from your life.
Okay.
In the prison ministry, when we talk about listening, we have something called Me Too-isms. You don't want to do that. You want to share the experience, but you don't want to try to top their experience with your bad experience. That's not why you're there.
Because they're the star of the show, not you.
Yeah, exactly. The star of the show. I like that.
Okay.
And then you respond in a way that shows concern. That does not necessarily, or in most cases, doesn't mean you're going to try to fix whatever it is. We try to do that. That's not what you're there for. There may be a chance for you to help the person some way, but that's not your primary goal. Your primary goal is to show them that somebody does really care about them. And there's another little thing that I think is important. We're talking about, grief and something bad going on. There's also empathy, sharing feelings with something that's good. If somebody had a birth of a child or have been cancer-free for a year, we sometimes, that's great, and walk away. We don't show empathy, share in their good emotion, their positive emotions. And I think that is important, too, to connect that same way. That's
big, Jeff. I mean, because you're right. The real positive stuff can sometimes be easy to just turn away from. Mm-hmm. That's really good advice. So, hey, I got to ask you, one of our favorite stories in a previous episode, we talked a little bit about Winnie. And I know we have some regular listeners that may remember Winnie, but for those that maybe are just joining us for this episode, who is Winnie?
Winnie is about 1.5 years, maybe 2-year-old boxer pit bull mix that's a rescue dog. We've had her about 3 months now. Winnie is she's exuberant. We call her our little trip hazard because she's always getting under our feet because she's so happy. But Winnie is a lot like a lot of dogs. A dog, some people will disagree with this, but I've seen studies show that this is true. Dogs show empathy to their owners, to the people that they're with. If we've had a bad day, she'll come up, and instead of doing all the running and jumping and all the things that she normally would do, she'll come up and want to cuddle. She'll put her head on your leg and just look at you to comfort you. She's showing empathy. She's not saying a thing. She's not telling me how to fix it. She's not really asking me what's going on. She's just being there to comfort. And I think that's what we miss in today's society. There's not very many people that can do that for someone else, just to be there to comfort them. And that's why increasing empathy, I think, is important.
Does that kind of go back to we're a very me-oriented society, mm-hmm. right? Considering the environments that we run in, be it politics, be it religion, be it just in general, this idea to be self-focused. Mm-hmm. Because I got to imagine that if you're very self-focused, it probably is pretty difficult to give somebody undivided attention and listening. Would you agree? I mean, is that
very much when you're in a conversation with someone? Okay, what is going through your mind while you're listening? Are you listening to the person, or are you planning your response to what they're saying? You can't do both very well at the same time. If you're planning your response because I want to have this great input into the conversation, you're not being very empathetic. That's the me.
I think it's important that we look toward the idea of extremes again.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about that, the two different extremes in this area?
Well, distant is where you are shut off from everybody. You may be in a group of people, but you're not connecting with them at all. You're not really there for anyone. Even they might be there for you, but you've shut them off. Mm-hmm. You're isolated. You ignore feelings. If you do start feeling some empathy for something, you stamp that down because you don't want to get involved. You don't want to expose yourself. You don't want to show weakness. You think things through. Well, you're in this situation because you did this, and this wrong, and you deserve it.
Yeah.
That's a big extreme. So there's that. So you have trouble switching from feeling the emotions that are present. Instead of feeling them, you're analyzing them.
In some ways, we've touched on it in other episodes about the idea of awareness, and maybe self-awareness is the right way to say it. But I would say from my own experiences and being around smart people, being around not so smart people, the majority of folks out there can read when someone doesn't care. And I think that's important for us all to remember, especially if we're in this area of extreme here, because sometimes you can think that the person is not getting it, but most people can tell when you are a disinterested party. So what about the other extreme?
Okay, well, entangled, I like that. Somebody that has very high empathy already, that can be a hindrance to getting through life. As an example, let's say you're a supervisor and you have a coworker that is a great person that shows up for work every day, but they're just not cut out for that job. They're talented in other ways, but you don't want to have the conversation. This isn't working out. You're not happy. Your coworkers are not happy. You don't want to have that conversation. So your empathy is keeping that person on, maybe with some hope that they'll change. And that's probably not going to happen. So your high empathy is harming everyone. You're harming the person's coworkers. You're harming themselves because they're not happy. They're not going to be able to grow and do that. And you're harming yourself because you're dealing with all this stress. These coworkers are upset because this person, not because they're not trying, not because they're giving their best effort. They're just not cut out for that job. Nobody is cut out for every job. Empathy can also hurt if you don't let things flow. Sometimes if in a situation you might want to stop this because it might cause harm to the person, but that might need to happen for growth.
That's really, really difficult and very, very true.
That happens a lot in families. Okay.
I can vouch for that.
Okay. Yeah. We kind of remember this, what we've been talking about is not just work stuff. It's life stuff. So yeah, empathy can do that. Showing empathy in the workplace also can be when somebody is going through a rough time and, it's a temporary thing. Maybe they're ill, their spouse is ill, something like that. And you can show them empathy in a proper way by going, you don't need to say anything. You just cut them some slack. Mm-hmm. Or you let them know, I understand you're going through a rough time. It's okay. That's where empathy can be used the correct way.
Let's look as always, what are the dangers here?
Well, the dangers are high empathy can put you to be vulnerable. Sometimes it could be physically vulnerable. You see someone along the side of the road and you want to help someone or you want to do something and it might put you in a physically dangerous situation. But it's more putting you in an emotionally dangerous situation where you're not having any boundaries. And that's okay. Boundaries are important. If you don't have boundaries, you're just going to be taken advantage of. So you need to couple your empathy with all the other competencies we've talked about, recognizing your pattern. And my pattern is I'm not going to have the conversation with the person, so I'm just not going to do it. So that high empathy coupled with a pattern of not having the conversation can hurt everybody. That's the biggest danger, is just making yourself vulnerable for things that aren't positive.
Let's look at some homework.
Okay.
What do you think? What can our audience take away from today's episode and maybe work on that can help them increase their empathy?
When I was thinking about this, I was trying to come up with a safe way for people to do this.
That's important. Okay. Safe is good.
So I would say to your comfort level, try to connect with people differently than you have. If you're already connecting on this kind of a level, fine. But if you're the normal person that when a coworker or somebody in your family is not feeling well and you just try to, however deeply you're comfortable with, connect with them differently. Try the actual listening to what they're saying. Try the non-judgmental part of it. Just do that. And sometimes that's all you need to do. And you might want to practice it just in your mind before you try to do it, because this is one that can get you in trouble if you're not careful.
There's something that leaps out to me as you said that, Jeff, is that the majority of people want to be heard, right? Mm-hmm. They want to be listened to. And oftentimes, especially if the situation is pretty deep, they realize that you're not coming around to their cube and going to fix their problem for them.
Right.
But the idea of being heard is real important.
Sometimes when people can talk it out with you, they find their own solution. And that goes back to what we talked about in some of the learning philosophies. That wisdom comes within that person. The person that's going through this situation probably has what it takes to get them to where they want to be, but they just need to verbalize it. They need to have somebody to bounce it off of.
And even if that means just having a better outlook on a problem that maybe is not something that can be necessarily fixed, right? Mm-hmm. Coming to the end of this episode, as always, great talking with you.
I enjoyed it.
Thanks for subscribing and listening to the Spirit of EQ podcast with Jeff East and Eric Pennington. Spirit of EQ is a preferred partner of 6 Seconds, the Emotional Intelligence Network. 6 Seconds is a nonprofit organization researching what works in emotional intelligence. Best practices are shared through methods and tools that are global, scientific, and transformational. To find out more about Spirit of EQ or to request a speaker, go to spiritofeq.com. Our contact information is in the podcast show notes as well. And now for our special offer.
Hi, this is Jeff again. I just want to let everybody know that if you have any questions or want more information about anything we've talked about, just send me a quick email. And my email is jeff@spiritofeq.com, and I'll get right back with you. Thanks.